Hey, what is going on, guys? If you want to know how to best test your explosive, plyometric, and all-round dynamic qualities, here are 3 of the best ways I think that you can do it. So let's dig into the first one. So an absolute must is testing just your general vertical jump, okay? So you are going to use a piece of equipment like a plyomat here or any jump device, okay? All we want you to do is a counter movement jump. What I mean by counter movement is by setting up statically, okay? We're not gonna lift our feet up before we jump at all. We're gonna have our feet planted on the ground. What it's gonna do best for us is gonna test how well we can create force with no momentum really, apart from this little drop and drive. Now, if we totally take that out, we would be doing what would be called a squat jump, where we'd be starting down here and we'd be trying to just explode out of that concentric pushing action. So we do have a little bit of a stretch shortening cycle here of when we drop into that counter movement and jump and take off. But counter movement jump is super easy to test. Everyone should be able to do it. So I can step onto the plyomat, I drop down, jump up, boom, there we go. 40-inch vert, let's just come up. Maybe not quite a 40-inch vert, but you get what I'm saying. This is a must have. Now, if you can't use a plyomat, what can you do? I can stand next to a wall. I can measure how high I can reach up. I mark it with chalk. What am I gonna do? I'm gonna put a bit of chalk on the end of my fingertips and I'm gonna jump up and touch up as high as I possibly can. So, simple ways to test a really simple metric. What you're gonna get out of this is either flight time or jump height. Doesn't really matter what one you take. Ultimately, you can chuck some of that data and figure out what your jump height is roughly from your flight time. Ultimately, I think if you're testing this as a male athlete, that is a senior athlete, maybe they've just got out of high school and they're moving into a collegiate setting, you should be looking to break over a 32-inch vert. If you're a female in that case, you should be looking at around 23 to 25-inch vert. High school athletes, you can probably take 2 or 3 inches off of that. And if you want to be super elite, you should be looking for the high 20s as a female, and you should be looking for the high 30s and maybe creeping into the 40s as a male athlete. So, next test. Now, I'm going to want to know how reactive I am as an athlete. Again, I'm going to want to use a piece of equipment like a plyomat. And what I can get from this plyomat is I can get contact time and I can get jump height or flight time, is often the case used in what we're going to test today, which is a reactive strength index or an RSI, which you might have heard before. So all I do, I'm standing, or I can be off the mat, it doesn't really matter, but this is the simplest way to do it. You're going to do a one-off takeoff, okay? This is just going to get a 1 unit of an RSI measure. So I'm going to take off. First thing it's going to do is it's going to record my contact time and then the subsequent flight time after that. So if I'm gonna do a single version of it, this is how I would do it. Take off, react, and land back on the mat. Now what you probably saw is I was pretty slow on the ground. So if you wanna make it a little bit more towards a higher reactive strength index, you've gotta make sure that the contact time is super fast. So I can actually start with less of an output and try and really hit the ground quickly to pop me up as high as I can. So smaller takeoff, but much higher. So if I look at those differences in RSI, I can see that there's almost 0.8 of an increase in my reactive strength index. How you calculate reactive strength index if you don't have a plyomat is I take the flight time and I divide it by the contact time. So let's say I jump 0.50 of flight time, so half a second in the air, and I divide that by 0.2, it will give me, boom, my RSI. Now, if you want to test this in what I think is a bit more of a clearer method, then we look at using what's called either a 10-5 method or a 4-2. I've got the 10-5 set up on my plyomat, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use 10 reactive jumps, and it's going to take the best 5 average RSIs from those. Gets rid of all the noise. So if you've done pretty shit takeoff here and there, that's absolutely fine. What we can do is use just those best 5. So I stand on And I look to be as reactive as I possibly can on the ground for all of those 10 contacts. I'm still trying to maximize how much jump height I can get out of that, but realistically it's this fine balance. You don't want too much jump height or you're gonna spend too much time on the ground. And you don't want to be too fast, otherwise you're not gonna be able to exert as much force as you want to get you into the air. So let's show you this. Quick 10-5. So from here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Awesome. So there we go, 10-5, and it has given me my average as a 2.72. What does that mean? It doesn't really mean a lot to you. Ultimately, I think with most of your jump testing, you want to make sure that you're progressing that over time. If you want to look at normative data, I think that everyone should be looking to try and hit at least a 3. But really where the magic happens is in the 4s. That's more of an elite score in terms of reactivity. So why would I want to test reactivity? Who doesn't want to be reactive? Who doesn't want to be able to plant their foot on the ground and leave the ground fast and dynamic? Reactive strength has a big relationship with speed, with jump ability, and all-round athleticism. This is a really simple thing to test. You don't necessarily need a plyomat. It can be done with a simple phone calculation. There are apps out there where you can crunch that data, and all you need to do is set your frame rate at a high frame rate so that you can get the best calculation possible of the time spent on the ground and the time spent in the air. That's all you need. You need the air time and the ground contact time. Once you've divided those, then you'll get your RSI. So, reactive strength index, make sure that you are testing that. So, a little bonus tip. If you want to do both those tests, counter movement jump and the reactive strength index in one test, here's how you do it. So, what we do is a counter movement jump into an RSI. Now, it is going to be a little bit difficult in terms of managing yourself, but I think after a little while, you can quickly get used to doing this, okay? So my goal is, as I take off, I jump as high as I can. As I'm coming back down, I've got to remember to hit the ground fast and then react and take off high again. So, big counter movement jump. So I jump up and then I react. Boom, counter movement jump and reactive strength index in one test. So there we go. I've got my metrics, I've got my flight time for my counter movement jump, and I've got my contact time, and then next jump height to calculate my RSI. So that realistically is going to give you great data. It shows how good you are with starting strength, being able to create force, and it subsequently gives you a reactive component of strength as well. So there's a little bonus for you. Okay, now where I think that you should look to test next is how you can create reactivity. And creating reactivity can be done using a test called a max RSI test. So again, we can use a plyomat or we can use flight times, ground contact times to measure this. But what I want to do is I'm going to do a little shuffle, almost like a little shuffle leap onto here, okay? I don't want to float up into it. I want to be flat and punch straight up. What this is going to do, as I said to you before, is test how well you're creating reactivity, okay? How well you create a stiff position and how well you can traject out of it. So this would be great for correlating it with acceleration ability. So the guys that can accelerate the best can probably do this movement the best. So what does it look like? So we roll forward and we punch up. Gives us the same data points as we saw before in the normal RSI test. We're testing contact time and then we're testing the output of that landing. How well can you take off out of that? What's different is we don't have this continual RSI. So the original RSI, we'd be looking at utilizing momentum. Here we're looking at creating momentum, but both from a reactive standpoint. I'll give you this example again. So we roll forward and we pop up. Simple test, can be done anywhere. All you need is a phone or a plyomat to do that. So that is max RSI. Again, some more bonus tests in here. So some of you might be thinking, well, okay, cool, we've done some pretty basic bilateral stuff, 2 foot. We're testing some pretty, what would be crude kind of data points. What if we wanted to get a little bit more specific? Well, My buddy Rich Burnett, who created the Plyomat, has given me a great one. And this one is a lateral bound into a vertical hop. Bound across and hop up. And that is going to give me some really cool data in terms of how we look at, first of all, how I push out. That's a great thing to look at. How well do I single leg take off laterally? But how do I then deal with that, decelerate that horizontal momentum and convert it vertically? Great test. Test left and right and get that measurement of whether you want to see it symmetry or whether you want to test for asymmetry. And it's going to give you something that's a little bit more specific. That's a great test to do. Our last final bonus test is going to be, we're going back to the RSI test, but it's a single leg RSI. Single leg RSI is that much more specific to how you move as an athlete. And it's exactly the same way in which you would have done it on 2 feet, but we're doing it on a single leg and we are cycling that leg. And I like to do a single leg RSI in a way that is more cyclical, so you can use those high rep counts and do a 10-5 test. But you're just going to stand on Plyomat, or you're going to film this and grab the contact and flight time again, and you are looking to be stiff and reactive on a single leg. Nothing is really more specific than that when it gets to playing basketball, playing football, soccer, and being really able to create a lot of force in a very short amount of time and traject yourself in any way, shape, or form as you play. You want to also level that up. You can do a single leg max RSI test. Again, we are really nailing the specificity of these sorts of movement. So that single leg normal RSI is that utilization momentum. This one is your single leg creation of reactive momentum. Here I take a little bit more of a step back because I want to cycle my leg into this a little bit to give myself a bit of space and then pop that up. So I roll forward, and again I take those same data points. I take contact time and I take flight time there. So there it is. That is the most important test that you should be doing to test your explosive power, your reactivity, your all-round athleticism as an athlete. And I think those are a great group. You've got those 3 fundamentals that you can start with: counter movement jump, RSI, and something simple like a max RSI test. And if you want to make it a little bit more spicier and really test how athletic you are, you move to the single leg. All right, guys, appreciate you. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment, and I'll see you on the next one.